single game.
It scores! Like Lazarus, the Avalanche have come back!
There's going to be a new season starting come game one. When you have an opportunity on a team like this, you feel it.
After the drama that was the 2016 summer, the Avalanche prepared for the 16-17 season. To start the year, they would have a brand new head coach joining the ranks, Jared Bednar, who had recently just won the Calder Cup with the AHL's Lake Erie Monsters. Bednar had been hired by Sakic and had many been rumored to be by Sakic's new protege for a long time. Unfortunately for Bednar, he wasn't exactly put in an ideal situation. He would be forced to coach a team while not being able to implement his new scheme or his own staff. With the Patrick Waugh resignation, he would be forced to use Waugh's staff. He wouldn't bring any of his own. This would force him to not have enough time to implement his system by the time the season began. And unfortunately, it only got worse from there. The 2016-17 season for Colorado was a complete and total disaster. The Avalanche would lose 60 of their 82 games that year, only including 56 regulation losses. The team completely sputtered out. They never got going. McKinnon led the team in scoring, but only had 53 total points. Mikko Rantanen, who was a rookie at the time, was the only Avalanche player to reach 20 goals, and he only got to 20. Joe Colborne was supposed to be the big free agent signing, the big boost to Colorado's new offense. He did score a hat trick in his first game with the Avalanche, and then completely fell off the map after. He was a healthy scratch on multiple occasions and played bottom 6 minutes, for a guy who's supposed to be a top 6 forward. It was a complete and total bust. Injuries at goaltender completely doomed their season. Varlamov would only win 6 games that year and recorded an .898 save percentage, and he was out of the lineup the majority of the time. They would be forced to lean on Calvin Pickard, who was the team's best goaltender with a .904 save percentage. However, he only won 15 games. The Avalanche recorded an all-time low 22 wins for 48 points, finishing dead last in the NHL. They were not just bad, they were one of the worst teams in the modern era of hockey. Everything had gone wrong for them, and there was rumors of blowing up. Sakic and Bednar were thought to be dead men walking and wouldn't last past the season. And then another swift punch to the gut. In a very talented draft class, the Avalanche would end up losing all 3 draft lotteries. Despite having the worst record in the NHL by a long time, the Avalanche would be drafting 4th overall. In many people's minds, it was the perfect cherry on top to what was a complete nightmare season. And now it was just a matter of when Sakic would be fired. But elsewhere in the sports world, a certain event had occurred during the playoffs. An event that would impact the Avalanche's future and change the NHL in a big way.
That one came off Stallberg. It's Schultz working it back in deep. Fresh from the bench, it's Crosby. Crosby on Kunitz, a shot. Penguins win it! And they go to the final!
The Ottawa Senators suffered a heartbreaking loss in double overtime of the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final to Pittsburgh. They had fallen, and they were looking to upgrade so they could get back to the mountaintop. This will come into play later in our story. For now, back to Colorado. But there was still a draft to get ready for. But there were still some great players that the Avalanche, or at least the media, felt that the Avalanche could have needed. Nico Hischier was the 1st overall pick. The 2nd overall pick was Nolan Patrick, and then Miro Heiskanen to the Dallas Stars. Who did the Avalanche get with the 4th overall pick? Cale Makar, a talented young defenseman from Alberta. Many thought he would need a lot more time marinating in the AHL before he was ready for a regular role. But the Avalanche didn't have time to sit on their laurels. Sakic needed to make moves to tweak their roster. They lost Calvin Pickard in the Vegas expansion draft, which means they needed to make moves quickly. Even though he would have to spend time in the AHL, the Avalanche needed to get goaltending depth. So from the KHL's Traktor Chelyabinsk, the Avalanche required Pavel Francouz. A talented goaltender, but he would spend some time with the Colorado Eagles before making a jump. They did get some young forward depth with Alex Kerfoot, Colin Wilson, and defenseman Ryan Graves. But then more drama hit. Matt Duchene was tired of losing. He said that everyone in the team was burned out by January, and he demanded a trade out. Sakic knew that he had to trade the young star, but he had a king's ransom and he demanded it, and he refused to budge from his demands. There was heavy criticism as why Sakic wouldn't move Duchene, and at the start of camp Duchene would remain in Colorado form, including now an infamous photo shoot in which Matt Duchene looked completely despondent. Clearly he wanted out of Colorado. But the 2017 season was set to begin. The Avalanche did start 8-5, with getting much better production from the core players. Not to mention the goaltending was much better, especially with Varlamov back in a healthy form. But then it happened. On November 5th, 2017, during a game with the New York Islanders, Matt Duchene was pulled mid-game. He had been traded to the Ottawa Senators. Remember that little OT loss we showed you earlier? Well, this is the loss that affected it. The Senators were hungry for another trip back to the Eastern Conference Final after falling short against Pittsburgh. So they were determined to get the big upgrade piece that would send them over the top. They felt they needed an upgrade from Kyle Turris at center, and that Duchene would be that for them. Nashville also needed an upgrade at center in the Cup Final. So Sakic used this to his advantage. He traded Duchene to Ottawa in exchange for a first-round pick that was conditional, or had a condition attached to it, a 2019 third-round pick, rookie forward Shane Bowers, Kyle Turris, and Andrew Hammond. He would then later the same day flip Kyle Turris to Nashville in exchange for Samuel Girard, Vladislav Kamenev, and a 2018 second-round pick. It was the king's ransom that Sakic had demanded. He got what he wanted and then some. Using this, he began to add to the young core. With moving Duchene off, McKinnon was moved into the top center spot, and he flourished. McKinnon rediscovered an elite form with a fantastic season. 39 goals and 58 assists for 97 points on the year. Landeskog and Rantanen were second and third in scoring in the team. Even though the depth was lacking and they weren't exactly a full fleshed-out unit, the young players were performing as advertised. With Erik Johnson back fully healthy, the defense was finally rounding into form again. Varlamov bounced back with a .920 save percentage season, and Jonathan Bernier was decent in the backup role. The Avalanche recorded 95 points and ended up making it back to the playoffs. It was an unprecedented year considering that they had just made some moves that many people thought would kill the team. But the Avalanche thrived in the chaos. And with Jared Bednar finally getting a chance to implement his own system, this allowed the young movement to grow. Unfortunately, they weren't exactly lucky. They lost Erik Johnson and Varlamov to severe injuries right before the playoffs, and they would be forced to play the President's Trophy winner, the defending Western Conference champions, the Nashville Predators. And the Avs gave the Predators everything they could, forcing tight games and 2 upset wins. One of them, they had to use a piece from the Duchene trade, Andrew Hammond. With Varlamov injured, they forced themselves to turn to Hammond when Bernier faltered. Hammond would only play 3 games, but he recorded a .933 save percentage. He was brilliant, and he recorded a win with the Avalanche. But unfortunately, it all came crashing down in Game 6, when they were completely blown out by the Predators. But despite this loss, the Avalanche had renewed hope again. And to add to it, the Senators had completely fallen apart. The Duchene trade did nothing for them. They finished last in the NHL. But they did have a condition with the first-round pick they traded to Colorado. Since it was top 10, they could give the Avs their 2019 first-round pick, which they elected to do. This gave Avalanche fans a ton of hope for the 2019 season. But then the Avs still needed to make big moves going into the 18-19 offseason. They elected to trade for Philip Grubauer to address their goaltending issues. They added to the defense in Ian Cole. And then they signed a young forward undrafted from Denver University, Logan O'Connor. The Avalanche weren't exactly a cup contender yet, but with Sakic and Bednar at the helm, their vision was finally starting to take place. This is the start of Colorado's run.